Hello, it's the Outdoor Gibbon podcast. Thank you for joining me for another recording. This time we're going to be talking to a German hunter called Henrik, and we're going to look at all the things that go through the German hunting exam and some of his hunting experience. But before we do that, let's have a quick chat. Obviously, we are mid-September. Good grief. Yeah, harvest is still it's just really started again in Aberdeenshire. It's been a stop-start affair, so we've got lots of crops still standing, haven't been able to get on the land, haven't been able to really get out and do any fox control because cover's been up. They were slow in cutting even the margins this year in some areas. So it's all just a bit of a mess, and that just means that everything's a bit delayed. But the weather has finally taken a turn, and it's a bit brighter out there. Bit of an Indian summer. How long it'll last, who knows? Still some promising roebucks about, certainly some decent stags coming off the hill. I'm not really doing as much hill stalking at the moment, purely because we've had a few issues with just negotiating a bit of land, and everything takes time, and these things sometimes take far too long, and the season marches on. But I'm not going to wish it away too quickly because we've got some really interesting guests. Maybe some of them are already recorded, and the lineup is looking very good. We've also got a very interesting one coming at the end of the month. It will be released on the 30th of September, and it's everything you want to know about red squirrels from a good friend of mine. So check back for that one. It'll be a good one. But we'll get into this podcast now, and let's have a chat with Henrik. He is also a member of the Pulsar Prostaff team. I haven't actually met him yet. He wasn't available to be out in Lithuania at the time, but hopefully I'll get to meet him soon. Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Gibbon podcast. Today I am joined by Henrik, who is a German hunter. We're going to get started, and obviously he's sat out on his balcony for anybody, because you won't be able to see this. A couple of trophies and deer skulls behind him, but how you doing?
Fine. Thanks for having me on the show.
No worries at all. Thank you. So my usual question to anybody that comes on this is, let's get a bit of background about you and how you started in the hunting world.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So I'm Henrik. I'm 50 years old. Got 2 kids, started hunting, in 1995. That's quite a long time ago. I realized when saying it. I got into it probably like most people get into that stuff, interested in nature, started with fishing, wanting to go further, did my hunting license, and it's Germany, you need a license for everything, so no license, no hunting. I started that, then it took quite a while until I had the opportunity to actually go out and do some hunting, but nevertheless, I would say since 1995 I'm a hunter. Since the early 2000s I would consider myself to be a real hunter, gathering real experience, not just occasional hunts. And from there on, it went just like, new ways of hunting, new knowledge, new experiences, lots of failures, lots of learning from these failures, and finally ended up running a hunting school. So, training other people.
Yeah, so just going back, obviously you say you got into it around about 1995. Is there a long history within your family of hunting, or are you a new generation that's come into the hunting world?
Well, there's not a long generation. Like, let's say there is a long break in the generational issues. Like my grandparents, they were hunters. They, formerly lived in a part of Germany that's no longer Germany. In fact, it's Russia today. It's Kaliningrad, right? So that I'm talking about times before World War II. So there was some hunting in the family, but since then, never again. So my dad had a hunting license, but he never really got into hunting. He restarted, you can say, when I did my hunting license. So we went out hunting together quite a while, and that was very nice, actually, unexpected but very nice. So probably it would be fair to say that I'm a new starter there, bringing up the tradition again in the family. Yeah.
Fantastic. And are your children obviously interested in all of this, or is this is it the modern children that are more interested in a keyboard and a screen?
Oh, well, in fact, it's both,
Okay.
My son, he made his hunting license 2 years ago. He just turned 18, so now he doesn't need me anymore to go out hunting, which I notice in the use of our hunting car and the availability of high seats in the area where we're hunting. But that's good. I'm happy that he's into that. Obviously, like all young people today, they're very much into, the screen, as you said, and the keyboard. But he still has a blast being outside, doing hunting, taking his friends. One of his friends made his license as well. My daughter, she used to be extremely interested in it, even though more the part after hunting, when it was about, processing the deer that we shot, that interested her more. So
okay.
Probably she's going into some medical field, I would say. But yeah, she had a lot of issues going on. She spent a year in the States, so that made her lose track of that hunting tradition a little bit. But we never know. I mean, she likes to be out in the woods with us doing some hunting. So she's fine with that. She's interested in that. But she's not like this dedicated, passionate hunter, which my son is more, I would say. Yeah.
You see, that's really interesting. Obviously, going to the States, you'd have thought America's heritage is very much hunting and all the rest of it. You'd have actually thought that would have helped drive it on and would have kept her interested, but obviously.
Oh, well, she got interested in shooting, though.
Oh, okay.
She was in
right.
Texas, and their host family. I mean, we had some brilliant hunting experiences in Texas when we visited them, and it was amazing. It's just a completely different culture
Yes.
of hunting, but very interesting, I have to say. A lot of fun, too. And it's just, in that age, she's almost 90 now, not quite. There is so many other things they get in front of them, like their friends, they're going out. I mean, they go out a lot, but they just lose this track of, with her friends, she's more, partying or traveling. Yeah. And my son, that's a bit different. I mean, boys and girls, there are some differences, right?
I do think that, yeah, you can bring them up, but I've never forced mine. It's up to them.
Oh,
they've got the understanding, and I suspect that you get to that point where you are in the teens and everything changes and life goes on, and you go out and you basically experience everything. Now, if you stay with hunting all the way through and the shooting sports, yeah, no problem. But just to be able to have it as a background that you can go away and come back to is key, especially if they've both got their hunting license, because that's something that always has interested me. The German hunting license it's a pretty intense course, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. So that was also one of the reasons when everything else popped up. My daughter said, "You know what, Dad, I'm going to wait with the license." And I couldn't agree more to what you said. I never put any pressure on her or my son doing the hunting license, because either they should do it because they want to, but not because they have to. And my daughter, she said, like, no, it's too much to do right now. Maybe she does it later, maybe not. I don't care, as long as she loves being out with us. Because the German hunting license, I'm not allowed, if I can say, or not sure if I'm allowed to say this on your show, but it's a pain in the butt.
No, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's basically doing your A levels, right? It's seriously a lot of learning. You learn about nature preservation, farming, forestry, a whole bunch of, everything that has fur, everything that has feathers. A huge part is just legal issues. What is allowed, what is not allowed. You learn about ballistics. You learn about guns, and I'm almost tempted to say gunsmithing, because, it's not really gunsmithing, but you learn so much about the technology inside that, it's a lot,
So that's one extreme, because obviously, like the UK, we have their they're optional. They're not actually compulsory. So you can do your deer stalking certificate level 1 and level 2. They cover the whole area of sort of ecology of the animals and things like that. But it never really gets that in depth. Well, it does. It kind of gets in depth, but it's not as much as the German course. But obviously, you've got the extreme difference of that. You really do go into the full. I think people get quite stressed over doing their hunting qualifications.
Oh, absolutely. I'm running a course right now. We had the first shooting exam today, then they had the written exam, and then 2 days down the road, there's the oral exam. And these people are they're stressed out because it's so much to learn. And even for us as teachers, like every time we teach it, we've actually separated the different subjects between us because it's just too much for one person to know it all. So you need to have kind of like a crush for one of those topics and then really dwell into it. Otherwise, you would never be able to stay on top of everything. Because after all, even though given these courses, that's nothing you could, make your living off, right? There may be 2 courses a year, the way we teach in our hunting school. Because you're also not only dependent on transferring all that knowledge, you're also dependent on the authorities to provide you with an exam date, because it has to be a state-approved exam, which means someone from the federal administration has to be present. So it's super formal, super complicated, or in short, it's super German. Yes.
But obviously, yeah, I can understand that. It's one of those things. But that you cannot get a firearm certificate, can you, unless you've got your hunting permit? Or am I wrong there?
Well, there is an opportunity to get a firearms permit if you do certain kinds of sport shooting.
Okay.
However, if you have your hunting license, you have a rather comprehensive firearms permit. So if you do have your license, put in simple words, you are entitled to 2 either pistols or revolvers, or 1 pistol and 1 revolver, without having to justify what you need them for, because they say like 2, we call them short guns. Yeah,
Okay.
2 short guns are allowed because you either do trapping or you have to set a final shot for a wounded animal or something. So they say 2 are justified. Then when we're talking about long guns, everything that's longer than 60 centimeters, there's actually no limit. You can basically buy whatever you want, as long as it's semi-auto or bolt action or single loader. As a hunter, that is a very comprehensive allowance that you get there, which in some sense makes a lot of sense, because different hunting situations, different needs in terms of caliber and so on and so forth. After you do all this, exam stuff, testing, learning, proof that you on top of what you have to learn, you actually get quite a privilege when it comes to gun ownership. Yeah.
I was going to say that certainly is. And you were saying about the long guns, obviously the rifles and the semi-autos.
Yeah.
In that, are you limited on caliber, or can you just go out and pick, say you want to get a 7mm or something like that, or
whatever? I just go to the shop, I buy it, and then with the long gun, I got 2 weeks to have it registered.
Okay.
And it's my free pick. And I mean, maybe if you pop up and say like, there's this semi-auto 50 BMG, right? The authorities would probably ask you like, okay, please elaborate. What do you need that for? Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But everything that is a reasonable choice within hunting, between say 22 LR to maybe, I don't know, 300 rum mag or 9.362 or whatever you have in large calibers, or even the big 5 calibers for big trophy hunting in Africa. That just, doesn't matter. You make the choice, you let it register, you go to the authorities, you have it registered, that's it.
That's phenomenal, because the UK, you see, we have to specifically tell them the type of caliber we'd want. So if you registered for you'd have to get the approval from the police first. So say you wanted a 308, you'd have to have a slot on your license that says you're allowed to go out and buy a 308. Once you've bought it, that's it. You then have to, if you want to change it, you have to sell your gun. and apply again to have that slot opened up to allow you to have another one.
That's weird.
Yeah, absolutely. So you might have a pain in the ass hunting exam, but after that, the freedom you have is phenomenal. Whereas we are it's very difficult. It's very restricted to get your license in the UK because you have to have good reason, because there is no, as I say, there is no qualification that you've got to prove behind it. So after at that point, they're sort of saying, well, why do you need that caliber? And I think you also have you've mentioned it there in the pod. You just mentioned it there that you're allowed to have the semi-autos, which again, the UK, we had an incident back in the 90s, which basically meant that all semi-auto center fires were banned. You can have semi-auto rimfire, like a 22LR, but no semi-autos. Because I think I saw a fantastic picture of that you put somewhere of your gun box, and it's like semi-autos and pistols and all sorts down at the range.
Yeah. I mean, like I found on that YouTube channel that I'm running, which I started, I don't know when, 2017, I think. That started because I was looking for information that most of the shops couldn't provide me, and most of the German media could neither. So I started doing research myself and thought, like, well, I could just as well share that. And one of the topics that I'm interested in is, like, when it comes to hunting, and that is related to the semi-auto topic, traditions. I'm a big fan of traditions as long as they make sense. But if traditions are just keeping something dead alive, I'm not a big fan of them. And there is certain reason for certain hunting situations where a semi-auto just makes very much sense,
Yep.
So, for example, we have that time of the year where we usually start to hunt female roe deer, which is around September. And that typically means that you have to have a quick follow-up shot, because what you shoot first is the fawn, and then you shoot the doe, right? And by that, you try to regulate the female population. And if you want to hunt humanely, you would certainly not shoot the doe and not the fawn. So you need to be sure you can have quick follow-up shots. And no matter how experienced the hunter is, the semi-auto just makes that so much easier, in the interest of the animal, in terms of like killing humanely, right? And not just firing away in the shot, one of the shots, and then being okay with maybe having not an optimal hit, which means suffering for the animal, and all that could be spared if we just use a semi-auto. But we have a large community in the hunting community which is very traditional, and semi-autos in their mind equal weapons of war, which is total nonsense, because it's just a tool like any other. And if you use it correctly, it makes a lot of sense. If you use it incorrectly, it can cause a lot of damage. But that's the same thing for a hammer, I'm trying to dwell into these topics a little bit, trying to come with information and not prejudice, allow people or help people build their own opinion. And that's basically what I also do in the training. We explain why certain situations in terms of traditional perspectives make a lot of sense, to listen to the important learnings that traditions often entail. But on the other hand, we also try to bust those traditional myths that are still there, and are basically nothing else than a representation of a lack of knowledge. And that's a lot.
That's good, because at the end of the day, I think, well, we've seen it in the UK especially. It's a knee-jerk reaction sometimes. Something causes everybody goes, oh, it's guns, they're dangerous. Well, actually, it's an inert piece of metal that just sits there. It's the person behind the trigger, that it's the idiot behind the gun is the problem. But this is obviously, every country, I think, has its problems with gun crime and things like that. But it's just one of those things. The knee-jerk reactions the UK's had in the past has basically removed pistols, for example, disappeared because of another gun-related crime in the UK. However, unregulated black market pistols are one of the biggest crime problems we've got over here now.
Absolutely, and that's not surprised, because like everybody who is a criminal has criminal energy now knows that they don't have to fear any resistance when they break into a home, right?
Yeah.
I remember. In fact, that was around the time where I did my license. I think end of the '90s, mid '90s, and I think that was around that time when that happened in the UK.
Yep.
And I remember a few years later, people looked into the statistics, and there was a dramatic rise in crime, which could be traced directly to that date where pistols were literally forbidden in the UK, if I remember that correctly. And that is so weird. And that that those parts of the population who actually don't know what hunting and guns are all about, that they are so manipulated by political interests, is something which I think is so sad in the first place. Because if we look at what's going on, I mean, it's not bad if people know how to either defend themselves or handle a gun. And in the first place, that is nothing that is related to crime or harming others. In the first place, that is a skill which Ukraine teaches us every day, that it is very useful, even in the 2000s, right? And so maybe we see a change in that, but of course we need to be careful that this whole topic is not, say, captured by the wrong people, right? Because
no,
obviously
absolutely.
also people on the other end of the scale who maybe are a little bit too much pro-gun out of doubtful reasons, right? So I think that actually hunters who often are very well grounded, say, in society, people who are, who have their roots in the middle of society, down-to-earth people, we could actually have a very important role in also explaining and showing people that, hey, we don't use a gun because we want to harm anyone. We use a gun in order to gather food, right? And to help nature regulate itself by, having an eye on the populations. And what we do is actually knowledge-based and nothing like, it's not about evilly wanting to kill. It's we do that with a purpose, right? So that's very important, I think.
But I think our biggest struggle at the moment, and we'll all notice it, anybody that uses social media, is if you put any picture of any part of a firearm, or even something that just has the words like ex-military in the title, for example, some camouflage or something like that, you become a naughty boy on the blacklist, or a naughty girl, and all of a sudden Instagram or something like that starts to restrict what you can do.
I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's one of the biggest problems, but that's absolutely ridiculous, because especially those big social media companies, they got big with the promise of democratizing the world, allowing people access. This was about liberty, the free exchange of opinion. And we know from certain areas in the world that very often those social media channels were the only way they could get in contact with the rest of the world. And now just these companies censor what they might not agree to, not because it's illegal, not because it's something that is proven wrong, but just because it's not their cup of tea. I mean, seriously.
Absolutely.
I mean, they basically, in my opinion, risk the whole reputation of that initially very important act of freedom that social media and the internet and everything gave to us, right? If democratization means that suddenly only those who consider themselves to be better than others can judge what others are allowed to say, we have a problem. And what we will end up with, if we continue that path, is that we'll strengthen the radical edges of the political spectrum, which I don't want. And at the end of the day, whether it's the extreme left or the extreme right doesn't really matter. I mean, like, for Christ's sake, we all know, or maybe we don't anymore, what democracy gave us, the rule of law and everything. And one of those issues is the freedom of speech, and the competition of opinions. And we are about to risk that because some people feel morally more advanced than others. And they're obviously not, I think.
I was going to say, because, well, for example, if we didn't have hunter-gatherer, none of us would be here today at the end of the day. He went out there with his spear and his stick, and he brought food to the table. And the key is, obviously, we've modernized that, and the gun was born, and we can use that to be our hunting tool. But again, it's the same with everything, even archery, even guys that bow hunt are regulated now. It's almost as if we've created a fluffy planet that only wants to see cat videos and extreme torture. Of course, that's allowed on social media. That never gets blocked. But you put up some educational how I harvested a deer, or how I shot a deer and turned it into meals for the family. Well, you're the bad guy.
Yeah, and that's actually really shocking, because what that means is that but these companies who do that censorship, they basically block out a very important part of reality, which is important to understand in order to also value life and nature and everything. So what we're aiming for, what we are forced into more, is an artificial perception of an artificial world. And that means that everybody who falls for that is easy to manipulate in either direction. It doesn't really matter. So I'm not talking about political preferences. I'm just talking about, if people don't know, if they're kept dumb, if they keep themselves dumb because they believe that crap, then it's easy to manipulate them, right?
But maybe exactly. Yeah, maybe this is the way. If you take away the people that go out and provide their own food, as you say, suddenly you can all be controlled, and what you eat and what you drink, the powers that be have that control over you, as they can't control the hunter, because the hunter can go out and provide for himself at the end of the day.
It's absolutely one of those reasons. And I mean, hunting reminds you of something that most societies, which we called civilized, which one can strongly discuss, but which most civilized societies have a problem with. Hunting reminds you of that there is no life without death.
Yes.
And that should lead everyone to be a little bit more modest, a little bit more humble, and a little bit more appreciating towards life and what it can bring, and a little bit more forgiving when things go wrong, because they can go wrong for everybody, right? And I see a lot of issues there. And actually, what is almost ironical is that all these discussions would never have been possible without hunting. You were referring to the times where the hunter brought food to the table. Many people don't know that without hunting, we wouldn't have language. Hunting was one of the strongest drivers that made us humans develop a language. And why was that? Because we were too small, too weak, too slow to compete with, I don't know what we had back then, saber tigers or whatever they were called, or bears. So we were just the weak species. The only thing that was stronger was our brain. So we needed to coordinate, and that led to the development of language, and now we look at hunting and everything as if it would be a cruel act and not the essence of life, and that is very weird.
It's crazy, isn't it?
I mean, I had people talking to me, criticize when they heard that I'm a hunter, and they were like criticizing me. Why would you ever kill an animal? You can just go to the shop and buy meat. And I was like, excuse me? and they were serious. I mean, I thought they were kidding me, but they were serious. Why would you kill a deer if you could just get a deep frozen steak in the next shop? And I was like, are you aware that steak was part of an animal before too? No, it wasn't.
But society has become a very strange place, because the disconnect, that complete and utter take away the connection that what you're eating on your plate actually once had legs of some description. It's the same conversation, though. You get people say that they could go to the shop and they can buy all their vitamins and minerals in a tablet. They don't need to eat vegetables, or they don't need to eat meat to get the protein. And it's like, really? It wouldn't wander around the place or grow in a field if we weren't supposed to eat it. And
yeah, it's weird. It's really weird what's going on. I just hope. I mean, like, let's not be too negative. I hope that people realize that something's wrong. I mean, otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people who are so dissatisfied with the current situation. Sometimes I think it's like a pendulum that goes one direction, and then it reaches a peak, and then it goes back the other direction. Just looking at our German history, I really hope we don't go too far over the middle again, because we have a bad track record when it comes to the pendulum, and I don't want to live in such a world again. Yeah, it's just this. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, the disconnect, it's unbelievable. Sometimes my fantasy isn't strong enough to imagine how far the disconnect has proceeded already, right? When you have these conversations with some people, at least.
It is tricky, and I think all we can do as the type of people we are, and the people that listen to this, and hopefully people that are new and coming in to listen to this, is you have to kind of find it out for yourself. And I think you touched on that subject about if you can have the connection that you understand about death, which is kind of, it's one of the biggest things as being a hunter, to be able to have that ability to go, I can do this, and what I'm about to do is I'm taking life. Once you're settled in yourself with that, and it is an emotional thing, then you're on the right path at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you know what? You're confronted also with the fact that do you still feel respect, or do you feel anything when you take a life, and then suddenly the same people who first accused you to be a murderer because you killed a deer, then suddenly say, well, but that's just a deer, that's just an animal. Well, seriously speaking, I had several hunting experiences where I didn't pull the trigger because I just felt awkward to disturb the beauty of the situation.
Yep.
And in that situation, I couldn't take a life. There are other situations where, yes, I could, because I wanted meat on the table, and that's a justification for me. And just, facing the fact that life is a matter of life and death, and you cannot have one without having the other, being aware of that, being a conscious human being, being reflective about this is very important. I think if I would ever shoot an animal and don't feel anything about it, I would probably stop hunting.
I do know some older generation that turn around and they say they don't shoot anymore. They've had enough blood on their hands, and from this point forward, that's it. They just enjoy watching nature go by. It's not about pulling the trigger anymore. They've done that. They've been there for a long time, and that's true respect to those guys, because that that you've obviously taken a lot of life, and at that point forward, it's time to stop.
Yeah. And another one of those topics, which is also highly disputed in the society, is obviously trophy hunting, right? When it comes to Africa, which is a very complicated issue, I think, because it's a very, very big dilemma. Those who look into the subject know that without trophy hunting, there wouldn't be any resources to finance rangers and protect animals and so on and so forth. On the other hand, I have to be honest, I personally would feel I couldn't do that. Go somewhere, shoot something, go back, with a horn in my hand or whatever, right? And I don't judge people doing that, but that for me is a thing. If I wouldn't eat it, or at least parts of it, or if I couldn't see a higher purpose in that, I would have my issues with doing that. And I think everybody should figure out where are their own boundaries, and I don't want to judge, absolutely not, because I know it's important. And some people might think, okay, Henrik is crazy, what's that idea? If he wants to eat something, then go to the supermarket, for Christ's sake, right? Fair enough. But what I'm aiming at is this: there is not this one right way to do it or not do it. But for me, it's always important that everyone who does what we do, who goes out hunting, does it with a conscious mind. and not just because it's fun or entertainment or an event or a kick or whatever. That's not it. For me, that's the wrong motivation, right? It should be a little bit more, because we have a privilege, we have a certain power, and with that power comes a certain responsibility, which we should fulfill. We should give an example. Otherwise, we just pour water on the mills of those who have something against us anyway. And I think that this is one of the main reasons why, despite all the hassle with getting the license in Germany, I'm actually very fond of the system that we have here, because people can't avoid these thoughts when they run through the education, So that's maybe where, after our little turn here, the circle, at least one of the circles, closes itself again, or the ends meet, because it is very good to learn from experienced people, so that you don't have to repeat all the faults by yourself,
Absolutely.
And yeah, this reflection, that especially considering the times, having kids who are at the screen for, in my opinion, way too long, I think that ability, that skill of reflecting, is something that people need to relearn, because having the screen in front of you, getting new impulses every second, just prevents you from doing any learning, any reflection. It's just like a permanent flow of, I don't know, kicks that you get, right? And
Yep.
when you have that, you just need more and more and more of it.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's once upon a time you went for a walk and there was no screen, and life just took its. You enjoyed nature and the world was out there.
Yeah.
Now everybody sits there and is on a screen, and it's all about instant sort of gratification and what's next and what's next and what's next.
Yeah.
And it's to actually step back, and even to just go out and sit there and watch the world go by. Do you know what? That's probably the best recharge, the best battery charge you'll ever get, because so much occurs around you if you sit silently in nature. So yeah, as you said, bringing the circle back round, I do actually like the European and the Scandinavian hunting license, purely because it does really ground the shooter. However, it's one of those things, you mentioned that in the UK and there's uproar because everybody thinks they should be able to they've got grandfather rights and they can go out and shoot. But yeah, the education program, I think, is certainly one of those things that it needs to be looked at in the UK more. Definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting times, because a lot of old wisdoms are questioned again and again. Those that we like, but also those that we don't like. So one is good, the other is not so good. But I think that's just the walk of time, or whatever you call it in English. I don't know. But it's a permanent change, and also that is something that you learn when you're hunting. I haven't experienced a day in hunting that was just like the day before.
I don't think there ever is. I think every day is different out in the real world, isn't it? You could never experience the same day, because the animal will not do the same thing and the world keeps moving on. Now, we were talking about moving forward in technology and all the rest of it earlier on. Obviously, we're both part of the Pulsar program. And it's a very interesting topic, because it came up while I was over there and I didn't realize it. But Germany, you aren't allowed actual dedicated thermal rifle scopes.
That's true. It's even more weird, because it's not only that we're not allowed dedicated rifle scopes, we're only allowed to use front attachments. And when it's thermal, that's not a problem. But for example, night vision, we are actually allowed to use a night vision front attachment, but we are not allowed to have any artificial light source connected to our gun, which means also not to the front attachment. Okay. Which means that night vision is out of the game, right? Because we have similar weather like you guys, a lot of clouds, right? A lot of rain. So if you don't have artificial light with night vision, you're done. So this is how we in Germany ended up to be predominantly a market for thermal. And even though you can do just the same things with a thermal front attachment, in fact, you can do it even more discreet, because you can just take it off your gun very quickly. We are not allowed to use these scopes out of whatever reasons. I had a few workshops with people from the authorities explaining to them why there is no practical difference and why it would in fact even reduce sources of error more if we would have dedicated scopes. They couldn't really explain to me why that was the case. It was just something that was forbidden, and it was or should be very cumbersome to change it, so they don't change it, and we are stuck with the front attachments. There we go. But we can use those now, finally, since a few years, and we do that. And most of the time it works. And so in order for it to really work reliably, that's how we two met, because that led me to Pulsar. I tried a few others, and they didn't always work. So, yeah.
It's very interesting because, Scotland recently changed its law because you could not. So England, Scotland have different laws regarding deer. And there was a law based in Scotland that basically said that no image intensifier or thermal device, so therefore a digital scope, could be used for the hunting of deer. So everybody had to use traditional glass. Well, recently there's been big changes in legislation and law, and it's now come about that if you have a license, which a lot of guys up here do because we have out of season and night licenses, you now can have a thermal or image intensifier to go hunting. So suddenly that really changed the game up in Scotland. However, thermal scopes within the UK have been around for a long time, and so is night vision, and you can do whatever you want with that. But it was always a big topic that came up, is people can go, is there it's the lack of training, I think, with thermal technology, that anybody can go out and buy this, plow it on top of a rifle and go out and shoot something. And we all know that thermal doesn't give you the whole picture.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, good point. What you just said, the lack of training, right? It starts with the gun itself. It continues with the knowledge about the animal, and it goes on all the way over the thermal technology and everything else. Like, this is one of the things that I'm a little bit sad about, that once people got their license, many of them seem to think they don't need to learn anymore. They're done, right? And that is not true. Especially using thermal, one of the things that I learned the hard way, unfortunately, hard way meaning several hours of tracking because I screwed it up, is that, as you say, you don't get the whole picture. You get a very reduced picture in, say, gray tones or whatever color palette you're choosing. B, you only see what is straight in the focus. So if your goal or your target is, say, 100 meters away, and there happens to be kind of a light brush 20 meters away from you, you won't see it. You would just look straight through it. But your bullet doesn't fly straight through it. It will hit a branch and it will go off somewhere. And in the best case, it just goes in the ground. In the worst case, it harms someone or wounds the animal. And there is so many new techniques, so many new routines you have to learn if you use thermal. And a few old techniques that are not invalid because you suddenly use thermal. So we had discussions in Germany in some areas where they started to use that. And then they were complaining about, all the game disappeared. And I was wondering, how can that be? Because if I use thermal, and I consider everything that I know about hunting, talking about wind, for example, I can approach the animals without them noticing me. So I can get very close, and if it's the wrong animal, I can get away without them noticing. So one time, just by coincidence, I happened to see a person who I know, just had thermal, happened to see him. I was standing up on a hill. I could see him coming into the hunting lease, going hunting. And I was like, what the heck is he doing? He was going right with the wind, crisscross through the lease, And I was like, for Christ's sake, just because it's dark doesn't mean the animals don't smell you anymore, right? So it was just stupid. So I talked to him afterwards. Like, are you complaining that more and more deer and wild boar are leaving the lease? Well, maybe you should consider wind. Well, but why? They don't see me. Yes, but they smell you. It's just not because the lights are out. We don't see anything, but
They still
they
can
have.
see. Yeah.
Exactly, and they have much stronger senses. And I mean, this was a bit funny, and he realized that he was been stupid, and we could all laugh about it, right? But it just, different situation, different game, different rules. Just learn it, for Christ's sake, or be open to learning, or ask someone who's got some experience. I mean, at the end of the day, we are hunting we're shooting on living creatures, right? So we should just invest that little bit of, what should I say, humbleness and openness to learning, that we can do a good job.
Yeah, I think the big thing is when you've got a piece of glass on top of your rifle and you look through that, you see everything, and there's no delay, and everything is there crisp and clear. However, when you move over, when you move over to digital tech, it doesn't matter how good it is. There's always a slight lag, or there's always going to be some pixelization or something in it, and I think that's one of the big topics that there's a lot of companies that make thermal kit and image intensifiers and digital scopes, but it's actually making sure that what it's seeing and what you're seeing are at the same time frame. That's the key, isn't it? That thing of delay that I was talking about.
Absolutely. When you said delay, I wasn't sure if we want to touch that topic, right? But you know what my favorite device is that I use from Pulsar, or from any brand? It's the Pulsar Proton. It's a device that failed miserably on the market, as far as I know. It is super simple. It doesn't even have a manual focus. It has a rather rough picture, but it has almost no latency. It is almost a one-to-one representation of what you're actually aiming at. I love that thing. Everybody was laughing at me, including some people I like a lot at the Pulsar team. And I told them that this is a device that I can fully trust. I've had devices from other brands. We did some testing. I haven't figured out a way yet to do a reproducible test, because I don't want to put something out that I cannot really prove, right? But I did a couple of, I used my own eyes tests, looking at the same thing with my bare eye and with a device, recording it, having the time all set up. And it's scary how much latency some devices have. And that, for me, is one of the reasons, especially when it comes to front attachments. It doesn't really matter if you're looking at devices for observation, but when it comes to front attachments, that's why I'm using the Pulsar devices. And even though I love the Krypton, which is a great device, absolutely, fully trust it, love to use it, good picture, but the device I trust the most is actually the Proton. It's super easy, and I know that it's just a one-to-one. Almost, but not noticeable lag. And the Krypton is extremely close, has a few more features, and if I have to hunt longer distances, that is the device of my choice. But I've tried other devices, and I always came back to them, to these two Pulsar devices, the Krypton and the Proton. And I don't get paid by Pulsar to say this, right? It's just like the way I got to know them was that they weren't satisfied with something I did, so we got to know each other. We were testing together and everything, and it was this. We found out pretty quickly that we had a shared interest to make this good products for hunters that do their job in the field, and. That brand didn't forget it throughout all the hype that we had in that market, throughout all the cheap competition, and many people go for cheap or whatever. But what many people don't realize is the better your image is, the higher your image quality is, the more resources your processor needs to process that image. And that simply means it needs more time. And that means you have a lag. Full stop. Can't argue for it.
And that lag, what I don't think people realize is that lag is that animal that you're going to shoot at could have taken a step, could have moved, and the image you look at on the screen is no longer true to what you're actually just about to take the shot at, which is a kind of a crucial point that I think it never gets really spoken about, especially with a lot of the manufacturers out there. And I think thermal training is something that I think in the future really does need to be drawn and attention be brought to it.
Absolutely. And it would help so much if one could figure out a test profile to objectively test that, right? In the interest of humane hunting. Because it is very difficult to test that. We had a case which I was too stupid back then to document. We have a video where the video shows, and I took that video with a Tacticam so I could see the crosshair, right?
Yep.
It was not the internal recorder, where the video shows that the crosshairs in the middle of the shoulder, and we didn't find the boar. So we had to track. After a few hours, we found it. And the entry wound, and it was like 40 meters away, so we're not talking about long distance, right? The entry wound was right in front of his hind legs.
Wow.
And the only way to explain that is, and that was not a Pulsar device, that was a different device.
Yeah.
One that didn't have internal recording. And the only explanation is that there is a tremendous lag between what you see and what really is happening. We found that boar, lucky enough, early enough to still use it or process it and use the meat. But, I mean, that experience did something to me, right? So then a good friend of mine, who's also part of the team, he's from Sweden, he came up with the topic first, brought it up in the team, and we immediately agreed because we had similar experiences, and he's a little bit more knowledgeable on the technical side. I'm not a tech guy. I use that stuff. I want to go hunting. I'm not interested in how many, I don't know, processor, pixel, pitch, whatever. That doesn't interest me. It should work. It should work reliably, and then whoever is an engineer should get happy with whatever else is there. But he's a little bit more knowledgeable, and he had the right terms and the right, approach to bring it up in the team. And is one of those advantages that these devices have, right? And the reason they have that is that they talk to their clients and to the real users, which is something that I think is very, very important. So, yeah.
No, it's interesting because obviously, as I say, again, that brings us back kind of full circle. The whole, you have a very complicated and education system, but you also have interesting terms of what equipment you can use, whereas the UK, you literally can have anything you want and use anything you want, and it's kind of scary that people can go out and do this with high powered rifles with very little training. And I've got a big fear that at some point something will go well. There have already been problems and things have gone wrong, but it will bring into cases that legislation and law will come in on these thermal devices, which nobody wants. But just be a nightmare.
Back to bow and arrow.
Well, we're not allowed those either anyway.
Well, then you do import game.
Exactly. We're going to be sitting there and try and chase them with a stick. I can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, but hopefully not. But it would be. Sometimes my opinion is maybe not with everything we have to wait until the legislation deals with it. Something could have the initiative from within the hunting associations. I mean, you do have these big hunting association in the UK. What's it called again?
Well, we've got many. We've got places like Basque. We've got the
Basque. That was the one. Yeah, Basque. That was the one I was thinking about. Why not make an initiative from there? Like, guys, we recognize an issue here. Let's train. I mean, I know it's hard. I have similar discussions with our regional department of our German association, and well, how should I put it? I would describe motivation in different terms than they answer my questions, But
you've hit the nail on the head there. There's too many people. There's too many organisations in the UK, and there's too many people trying to drive the boat in different directions. And of course, things like these initiatives aren't what they want to do. That's not the direction they want to go. So unfortunately, at the moment, though, those aren't thought about. They will come more thought about. At the moment, we're still going through the topics of lead-free ammunition and all the rest of it, which is a whole other topic we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. But
true.
We won't hit on that one tonight, because I think we'd probably be here for another hour talking about non-toxic ammunition and everything along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, we can open that Pandora's box if you want to. When it comes to rifle shooting, I'm actually not that critical towards it, because that works if you use American brands, because they know their shit. But when it goes to shotgun shooting, oh my God, that's a catastrophe.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It's terrible. It's terrible, and sometimes I wonder why our association. We do have good people. We have good initiatives too. But sometimes, a topic that goes along similar lines was the allowance of silencers, suppressors, right? Big thing in Germany, which we finally can buy like rifles, but it was a long way. And then I remember these discussions with people who were responsible, and we're like, we should use silencers so that we protect our hearing and the hearing of our dogs and our children and other people and people who are out there, horseback riding, whatever. And no, we don't need that. And then you came up with arguments, and they were going like, can you speak louder? I don't hear you, And you were like, that's the point, that's exactly the point. I've been shooting a rifle all my life. I hear well. No, you don't,
No, exactly. Because that wasn't that long ago that you were actually allowed to then have silencers for rifles, was it?
Yeah, that is, I don't know, maybe 5 years, 6 years max.
Yep. Yeah,
I lost track of time a little bit, but it's not very long ago. I mean, in the past, before that, it was almost impossible, right? For most, it was impossible. But then, I don't know what happened, why that suddenly became something we were allowed. But then, I mean, today, it's not an issue. But the discussions we had to get it allowed, I mean, then suddenly all these very traditional people came like, that is not hunting anymore. And I don't know what's on these people's minds. I mean, there's just nothing, really nothing you can say against the use of something that improves security, improves for most people also the shooting, because it reduces recoil, which means that they shoot better. It is a protection for the environment. There's nothing you can say against it, and they're still struggling against it. I don't know why that's the case. Why are people so afraid of some change?
I just think that's just a generational thing, and there's a generation out there that don't like change. It's one of those big things, isn't it? You say, because there's still parts of Europe. I can't remember who I was talking to now, where sound moderators and silencers, as you call them, are still banned, and you're still not allowed to use them. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. And I don't know why these people are so struggling against it, but yeah, I mean, we are a community which is maybe not very prone to change anyway, might be, downside of the tradition. But yeah, it's on us to change that, I think,
I think so, definitely. Well, I think that kind of brings us quite nicely to a conclusion that we could open that Pandora's box and go off all night about talking about non-toxic ammunition. But I think we've covered some good topics there, and hopefully, raise some questions for people to think about, and also given some of my UK audience an insight into sort of the way that Germany works with their hunting law and education system.
Yeah, it was a pleasure for me. I hope that it was of some use for someone out there.
I'm sure it will be.
Yeah. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So thanks for listening. Some interesting things there about German firearm law, the hunting exam, things you can get up to and how you can buy rifles over there and the difference between that and the UK. We looked at a few of the other hunted species out there. We're going to carry on this theme, and we're going to talk to a few different hunters from different parts of the world in the next one. So stay tuned as we bob around Europe, and we even go further afield potentially. I think we're heading off down to Australia at some point. So keep checking back, and we'll catch you on the next one.